Have you ever stopped to think if fairies, those enchanting creatures from fairy tales, are really as harmless as they seem? Behind the magic and glitter, there are dark stories of revenge, manipulation, and even destruction. After all, are they protectors of nature or predators on the lookout for those who dare to disrespect it? These questions lead us to a crucial point. What is the true role of fairies in the balance between humanity and the environment? In this video, we will explore the lesser-known side of these fairy entities, revealing their behaviors, beliefs, and how they can reflect the troubled relationship between man and nature. If you are passionate about mythology, ecology, or simply curious about what really hides behind the bright wings of fairies, stay with us. What you discover here may completely change your perception of them. Fairies are as old as the first myths that humanity created to explain the world around them. They appear as mysterious entities that inhabit forests, mountains, and rivers, personifying the natural elements and the intimate connection between humans and the environment around them. In Celtic folklore, for example, the city were considered the guardians of sacred mountains and representatives of natural forces. In Norse mythology, elves and subterranean fairies were seen as beautiful and dangerous beings, symbolizing both fertility and the hidden danger of the earth. This duality is a striking characteristic of fairies in all cultures. On the one hand, they are often portrayed as protectors of natural resources, punishing those who exploit or desecrate nature. On the other hand, there are reports of fairies who delight in human misfortune, leading travelers to fatal destinations or kidnapping children to exchange them for changelings. These two aspects, protector and predator, often coexist, making fairies complex and difficult to decipher. Furthermore, it is important to note that fairies reflect the values and fears of the societies that created them. In medieval Europe, for example, fairy tales often came with warnings about disobeying the laws of nature or ignoring traditions. In Brazilian culture, figures such as the Curupira and the Capra play similar roles, protecting forests and punishing those who hunt or deforest without respect. These myths still resonate today, especially in a world facing increasingly serious ecological crises. Fairy stories serve as reminders that nature has its own rules, and ignoring them can have consequences. Understanding this balance between the magical and the moral is essential to delving into stories that explore the role of fairies as protectors or predators. Fairies are often seen as guardians of the natural balance, entities that watch over and protect the purest elements of creation. In many cultures, they appear as defenders of forests, animals, and natural resources, punishing those who threaten them and rewarding those who act with respect and reverence. This protective side of fairies illustrates a symbolic connection between the magical world and nature, highlighting the need for environmental preservation. In Greek mythology, the Dryads were nymphs associated with trees, especially oaks. Each Dryad was intrinsically linked to the life of her tree, living and dying with it. Any damage to the tree was seen as a direct attack on the nymph herself, and those responsible could be punished with curses or bad luck. This intimate relationship between the Dryads and the forest highlights the interdependence between humans and nature, serving as a warning against irresponsible exploitation. Similarly, in Scandinavian tales, fairies that inhabit forests or water sources were known to protect these sacred places. Hunters or lumberjacks who disrespected these places often faced the wrath of the fairies, with consequences ranging from nightmares to fatal accidents. These myths not only preserve local biodiversity, but also reinforce the idea that nature had spiritual guardians who demanded respect. In Brazilian folklore, figures such as the Curupira play a similar role. With his feet turned backwards, the Curupira confused hunters and lumberjacks who ventured into the forest in a predatory manner. He represented the spirit of the forest, punishing those who ignored his presence or defied the laws of nature. Like the Dryads and Scandinavian fairies, the Curupira symbolize balance and the need for environmental protection. Although fairies are known for their severity, there are also stories in which they reward those who live in harmony with nature. In Celtic tales, farmers who tended their lands with respect and offered small gifts to the city often reaped abundant and healthy crops. These stories reflect a symbolic exchange between humans and the natural world, where care leads to prosperity. This idea of harmony also appears in Scottish legends, where those who respected fairy habitats, such as stone circles or sacred trees, received blessings. These stories promote an ethic of coexistence and reverence for nature, encouraging sustainable practices long before the modern concept of ecology. In the contemporary world, these narratives continue to inspire. Environmental conservation movements often use fairy symbols to highlight the importance of protecting the planet. By treating fairies as guardians of nature, these stories remind us that our future depends on maintaining a healthy relationship with the world around us. The protective side of fairies, then, is not just an expression of the human imagination, but a powerful tool for reflecting on our responsibilities to the earth. By revering nature, we recognize its complexity and our role in preserving that balance. However, where there is protection, there is also punishment. And this is where the darker side of these magical creatures comes in. While the protective side of fairies highlights their role as guardians of nature, their predatory side reveals a darker, more threatening aspect. In many cultures, fairies are portrayed as punitive, vengeful, or simply dangerous, especially to those who violate their domain or disregard the unspoken rules of nature. These narratives not only emphasize the fragility of the natural balance, but also serve as warnings about the consequences of underestimating the power of the world around us. Stories of punishing fairies are common throughout Europe. In Ireland, changeling fairies kidnap human babies, leaving in their place sick or deformed magical creatures. These exchanges, often attributed to the carelessness of parents, highlighted the role of fairies as ruthless watchdogs. The message was clear. Caring for the most vulnerable, children, was a way to respect the forces of nature and avoid the wrath of the fairies. Another Irish figure, the puka, symbolizes the punitive aspect of fairies. These shape-shifting creatures, often depicted as black horses or goats, were known to play cruel tricks on night travelers. Those who dared to trespass on their territory faced endless journeys through dangerous terrain or ended up in deadly traps. The puka exemplifies a warning: respect the unknown or suffer the consequences. In Slavic mythology, the Rusalka are a fascinating example. Female spirits associated with bodies of water. They often lured men with their beauty before drowning them. Although some legends suggest that the Rusalka were tragic victims of their own circumstances, their presence in the narrative symbolizes the danger that lurks in the reckless exploitation of natural resources, such as rivers and lakes. It is not only the disruption of the natural balance that brings out the predatory side of the fairies. In many cases, they seem to act simply out of pleasure or malicious curiosity. In Scandinavian folklore, for example, there are tales of subterranean elves and fairies who lure humans into their realms, promising riches or pleasures. Once there, humans discover that time works differently. While they live for days or weeks in the fairy world, decades or centuries pass in the mortal world. When and if they manage to escape, they often find an unrecognizable world, where they have lost everything they knew and loved. In Scotland, the fairies of the Unseelie Court are known for their malicious nature. Unlike the more friendly Seelie Court, the Unseelie attack humans without provocation, stealing property or even the health and sanity of their victims. This division between the two types of fairies illustrates how the fairy world reflects a moral duality. Not all forces of nature are benign or easy to understand. Another fascinating example is the myth of La Belle Dame Sans Merci, immortalized in John Keats' poem. The fair lady without pity is a figure who seduces knights, leading them to a melancholy fate with no escape. Her ambiguous nature, at once enchanting and deadly, reinforces the idea that fairies symbolize the dangerous allure of that which is beyond human control. Stories of predatory fairies have surprising relevance today. In a world where human impact on nature is increasingly evident, these myths serve as a reminder that unbridled exploitation comes at a price. Just like the characters in the legends who suffered for their arrogance or carelessness, humanity faces the consequences of ignoring the limits of the planet. Furthermore, the predatory side of fairies challenges the romanticized view of nature as something passive and gentle. Nature, like fairies, has a power of its own, which can be as destructive as it is generous. These myths force us to consider how our actions can trigger unforeseen and devastating reactions in the natural world. The predatory side of fairies, with its stories of punishment and danger, perfectly complements their protective side. Together, these narratives create a complete vision of the relationship between humans and the natural world, a relationship that is at once magical and full of challenges. Fairies, with their roles as both protectors and predators, are the perfect embodiment of natural balance. These magical creatures symbolize the delicate relationship between man and the environment, a relationship where respect and harmony can bring benefits, while exploitation and neglect can lead to disastrous consequences. When we reflect on these narratives, we realize that fairy tales go far beyond fantastical stories. They are timeless lessons about the need to live in balance with nature. The duality of fairies is not just a peculiarity of myth. It is a symbolic representation of natural forces. The protective side of fairies reflects the benefits that humanity can reap by preserving the environment. Abundant harvests, healthy ecosystems, and a more balanced life. On the other hand, the predatory side reminds us of the dangers of ignoring the rules imposed by nature itself, such as ecological disasters, species extinctions, and climate change. This duality also helps us understand that nature is not inherently good or bad. It simply reacts. Just like fairies, nature protects and punishes depending on how it is treated. This view can be uncomfortable for a society accustomed to seeing the environment as something that can be exploited without limits. However, recognizing this reality is the first step towards establishing a more sustainable relationship with the planet. Fairy myths, especially those that emphasize their predatory side, have a significant impact on the way we view and interact with the natural world. For centuries, these stories have served as tools for environmental education, teaching communities to respect the limits of nature and to avoid destructive practices. Even in modern cultures, these myths continue to inspire environmental conservation movements, showing that the lessons of fairies still have much to offer. For example, legends about fairies protecting forests or rivers can be reinterpreted to raise awareness of the importance of biodiversity. Fairy stories that punish overexploitation can be used to illustrate the dangers of unsustainable practices, such as deforestation and pollution. By combining these narratives with modern science, we can create a powerful approach to educating and engaging diverse audiences. In addition to reflecting our relationship with nature, fairies also reveal much about the human condition. They are a mirror of our fears, desires, and failures. The protective side of fairies reflects our hope that the natural world is a constant source of sustenance and beauty. Their predatory side exposes our deepest fears. Fear of the unknown, of nature's revenge, and of the consequences of our own mistakes. These narratives also challenge us to rethink our role as masters of the planet. In many legends, humans are not the protagonists, but rather the interlopers, trying to explore a world they do not fully understand. Fairies, as guardians of this world, remind us that we are just one part of a larger, interconnected ecosystem. Finally, reflections on balance invite us to learn from the past in order to shape a more sustainable future. Fairy stories show us that harmony with nature is not just desirable, it is essential. Ignoring this lesson can lead to irreversible consequences, but embracing it can help us build a more just and balanced world, both for ourselves and future generations. At a time when environmental challenges have never been more pressing, fairies offer a unique perspective. They remind us that balance is not a choice, but a necessity. Whether protecting or punishing, these magical creatures continue to teach us the importance of respecting and caring for the planet we call home. Fairies, creatures that fascinated our ancestors with their magic and mystery, continue to offer us valuable lessons. They remind us that the natural world is as generous as it is harsh, demanding respect and balance. As we explore their stories, we see that these are not just ancient legends, but messages that are deeply relevant to the challenges we face today, whether as protectors or predators. Fairies are reflections of our relationship with nature and the impact our actions have on the planet. If this video piqued your curiosity, leave your opinion in the comments. Do you think fairies would be more protectors or predators in our current reality? Share your favorite stories and ideas on how these legends can still help us rethink our role in the world. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more videos on mythology, folklore, and themes that connect us to the past and the future. Until next time, and remember, nature has its guardians. Be wise when crossing their path.